Tracey Bee is a former family law attorney who now specializes in helping self represented litigants navigate family court on their own. She calls herself a pro se family court strategist and a pro se advocate. And I am so excited to talk to her today because I think it's so important for people to research all of their options when it comes to the legal process of divorce. Tracey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. So glad to be here. I really am. Thank you.
Well, I want to start out by talking about your law career because I know you were in family law for a long time. I want to know a little bit about that and why you made the shift to being a strategist to help people do divorce pro se. And for those who don't know, pro se means you're representing yourself in court. You don't have an attorney standing there with you, you're not paying thousands of dollars. Tell me about you.
So, yes, I've been in family law for 25 years, off and on. But when I was in private practice, a huge part of the people that were coming to me didn't have the resources to actually hire me. So I've always, and I have a mental health professional background. So I've always had this desire to help people who couldn't come up with the $10,000 retainer. And so this Pro Se project has been in the work while I was still practicing. The thing is, you can't tell your colleagues that you're advocating for pro se litigants when you're actually practicing. So they kind of conflicted, but I left the profession altogether. I had a series of losses, one after the other. I had my child, and I swore I would stay home with him while I raised him. And during that time, I realized that going back to practicing wasn't something that was meant to be for me. So I decided to really do something that was fulfilling, that was meaningful, and that was gonna make me, say yay when I wake up in the morning going to it. And so that's how I got to this point where I actually help pro se litigants navigate their case from filing to finding, particularly when they're in family court. So, yeah, so I advocate for them actually, making sure they understand their rights, making sure they understand what the Constitution is and how it applies to them, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, this is way more fulfilling. I get to cross lines, I get to push buttons, I get to cross boundaries, and just all in the quest to help pro se litigants accomplish what they set out to accomplish in family court. So I absolutely love this.
I think your story is part of the reason why I was so drawn to having you on the show because with the divorce money guide, I'm doing somewhat the same thing. I'm trying to help women who have questions about the finances when they're getting divorced, but who can't afford to hire a forensic accountant like me. And quite frankly, don't need someone like me. I like to say in 95% of divorces, you don't need a forensic accountant. You don't even need to think about that. But you do need to understand your money. And so I needed to create a tool to walk them through what documents do you need? What do you look at? Because it's complicated if you've never done it before, right? Same with the law.
Absolutely. And I absolutely love that you're thinking that way. I'm going to tell you, this whole pro se self representation landscape is going to change with the technology, and specifically AI. It's already changing. And so, yeah, it's great that people are starting to think, especially divorce professionals, are starting to think beyond just representing them one on one, directly in our higher ticket offers. So, yeah, that's great. That's great. I think it's great.
Talk to me about doing your divorce pro se versus retaining an attorney. When we're going to think about one versus the other, some of the logistics, how does someone decide which of those paths they should go down?
So it's interesting that you asked this question. Actually, I get asked this question quite a bit. And so I created an assessment to help people determine that, because just because you could doesn't mean you should, right? So not everybody or their case are appropriate for pro se. So I think you should actually examine your own personal position, predicament, situation, circumstances to determine whether or not you're built to do this, number one. And I think you need to assess the issues, because some legal issues are more appropriate for an expert to actually take care of it. Like if it's parental alienation involved, if there's assets that need to be evaluated, things like that. It becomes a little, and not that a pro se can't hire CDFAs or forensics accountants on their own. It's just navigating that that avenue may be a little complex, unless, of course, they work with me and then I help them bridge that gap. But for the most part, if someone decides to handle their divorce on their own, they should actually start with going to the court's website, getting the forms, filling them out, getting them served, and it takes its course from there. What I want to also say is that even if you intend to hire a lawyer, even if you intend to retain an attorney, you should most definitely start the process on your own anyway. That first few months, whatever it is, whatever it takes, it's so empowering. And you need to be empowered by the time you actually go to hiring an attorney. So you don't need the court's permission. I've heard people say that. Oh, my judge said I couldn't be pro se. You're an American. You have the constitutional right to handle your own case in court. Yes, you do. So you don't need any permission. You just need to start the process on your own. If the case is already started, though, and you want to get rid of your attorney and you want to be pro se, there might be an extra step that you might have to take. You might just have to let the court know that you are no longer represented just for logistics purposes, but that's pretty much it.
Would you call yourself a coach for divorce? I feel like the word coach is overused and it kind of lumps you into a group where you really have some special expertise. So if someone were saying, "What do you call yourself?" and how do you help me through? I know you help people as they're starting this divorce process and helping them know what paperwork to file if that's something they need help with. So how do you define what you do?
Well, I will it depends on who I'm talking to. For the most part, the difference with me is that a lot of coaches. Actually, there are some attorneys who are coaches now too, and they do call themselves coaches in addition to attorneys. But for what I do, because I specifically work with pro se litigants, I am a little step above a coach. So that's why I call it a strategist, because with strategy, I interject my legal background and my skills as an attorney, as a litigator, as a matter of fact, into how I help people. I don't give them legal advice. I make that clear. But the skills and the expertise that I know, I actually use that with my clients. So my clients will have a divorce coach and me on their team at the same time. And because, I don't really focus on the emotional, I hate to say it, but if I think the emotional is sort of trumping what we're trying to do, their ability to focus on what we're trying to do, then I will tell them or I suggest to them that they hire a divorce coach. But for the most part, I'm either a pro se coach or a strategist. But yeah, strategy is a little bit more complex. It's my critical thinking skills at bay at its peak when I'm working with litigants. So yeah.
Well, and knowing the legal process, knowing what things are called, knowing what type of motion might be filed, all of that stuff from your legal experience is really invaluable. Now, when I talk to people in the divorce space, the most common reason I hear for people wanting to go pro se is because they want to save money. So I wanted to ask you, how much money can you save by doing that? And is saving money the most important consideration when you're making this decision to go pro se or not?
It should not be. And I took the latter part of last year refining my message to make it clear that if that's your number one goal, then you probably shouldn't be doing this, right? Because I've worked with people who really wanted to save money and they didn't want to do the work. When you're working with me, you have to do the work. You have to be willing to do the work. And believe it or not, there are people out there who want to do their own work, and
Mhm.
and yes, they wanna save money, but they actually absolutely want to do the work, and so they have to coexist. But, how much money? It varies. I mean, if you work with me for 6 months, you can wind up saving 30,000 dollars because the average divorce right now, I'm talking mid-conflict, is anywhere between 30 and 100,000, and that's mid-conflict. If it's high conflict with property and kids involved, I've had people tell me in the last few months that they spent $500,000 on a divorce. And yeah, I'm not going to charge you that kind of money. So I'm not in this to make money to get rich. I made way more money when I was in private practice, but I can sleep at night now too. I sleep through the night knowing that I actually made a difference, and I'm not a typical family law attorney that my clients are so disappointed in how I delivered my services to them. So, yeah, you can save money, but that shouldn't be your number one goal. Absolutely.
Well, I think for some people, it's really difficult because I work primarily with women when it comes to divorce. And so I hear so often from these women, I can't afford to get divorced. I have no way to pay for an attorney, so I have to stay married. So for them, saving money is really, really key. And so I feel like I agree with you that saving money shouldn't really be your sole focus in being pro se, but for some people it almost seems like they have no choice.
And they can still do it. They can still do it, absolutely. I've worked with people who that was their number 1 goal, but it depends on how complex the issues get, because when it gets if you're gonna be pro se and it comes to discovery and depositions and all of those things, it might be a little bit more complex, and a lot of people get intimidated by that especially if the other party has an attorney and has a bulldog attorney, then saving money it's gonna come it's gonna be out the window at some point. So,
Right.
the people who really can't afford to and they wanna do it, oh, I talk to them all the time. I have resources just for them, actually, because it breaks my heart to hear someone, especially a woman, tell me that she's in a situation that she doesn't wanna be or that's not safe for her, but she has to because she doesn't have the means to I just told somebody this yesterday. "Hey, let me tell you what you need to do. If you don't have the resources, let me tell you what you need to do, and you can still do this on your own." Absolutely. I don't leave them out. I'm just saying it's not ideal. Like, I do have resources where I give people who are in that predicament so that it walks them through step by step or whatever they need the help with. I actually have resources just targeted for them.
Okay, I want to play a little bit of game. I want to take turns and I want you to tell me a situation when it is almost for sure that someone needs to have an attorney working with them on their divorce. And then
Okay.
I'll give one and we'll go back and forth a few
Okay.
times.
Okay.
So, what do you think? What situation does someone for sure need to have an attorney and they should not be thinking about going pro se?
If there's false allegations of abuse. False allegations of abuse are really hard to work through on your own. You need an attorney.
Well, and one that I was thinking of was when your ex is abusive towards you, you probably need to have an attorney. I don't like to say always, but probably because it's going to be really hard to advocate for yourself, just given the history of how you've been treated, whether it's physical or emotional abuse. That's a really hard situation to go it alone, I think. What's another one?
When there's assets that needs to be identified and valuated. Those are complex for attorneys, let alone pro se to do on their own. Yeah.
I think when you have complicated child issues, you probably need an attorney as well. If you have a very high special needs child, when there's really significant conflict about custody, one parent wants to move away, the other one wants to prevent it, and they still want to share parenting time. Some of those issues, I think parenting coordinators can be really, really helpful. But I think no, having an attorney involved for some of the legalities is helpful in those situations.
And can I just say this? When you say, or when I say an attorney should be involved, that still doesn't mean you can't be pro se at some point in your case. Because having an attorney, there's so many ways you can work with an attorney. You can have them, you retain them throughout your entire case, or you can work with them on a limited scope basis where they just handle portions of your case. So working with an attorney doesn't have to be all in. There's a different variation.
That's a good point. I'm going to come back to that. I wanted to flip our game to telling me a situation when it's almost for sure that someone can and should do their divorce pro se.
I'm gonna tell you a couple of people that I worked with last year that was stellar. I had one guy, he was brilliant at researching. If you can research and analyze what you research, you can pretty much do it on your own from beginning to end. I had 2 people last year that were really good at researching. I mean, they brought things to my attention that I didn't think anybody would be able to find unless they had some sort of professional training. So if you're really good at not just researching, but analyzing what you research, you're in, you're good.
Now, see, I was going to go to the easy one of, well, if you and your ex agree on most things, it's probably pretty easy for you to go pro se. And
Well,
and
but
so
that was presumed. That's why I didn't mention that because I knew you were
right?
thinking that.
Okay, so give me another good situation where someone is a really, really great candidate and you would be like, "Yes, do it pro se."
I think, you know what? Honestly, I think a lot of stay-at-home moms can really handle their cases on their own. I think a lot of them are intimidated by the process, but when I talk to them, a lot of them can do it because a lot of them have win-win cases, right? If they're the primary caregiver in some states, if they were not the breadwinner, they're entitled to alimony for sure, probably if they have a significant amount of time in. They are entitled to child support in most cases. And if there's property, then, if they're in a community property state, then it's going to be split 50-50 anyway. They can get attorney's fees if they need to start the case and they don't have access to funds. I really think that they can do it. A lot of them are really terrified. So I've been focusing on helping them understand that they can do it lately. So, yep.
I love that encouragement because I work with so many stay-at-home moms, and so I think a lot of times stay-at-home moms aren't as confident in themselves because they've given up careers. It's been a while since they've been in the professional world or something like that. They often feel really diminished by their ex. And so the idea of taking the bull by the horns and being in charge of my own divorce can be really intimidating, but I love that you're encouraging that for stay-at-home moms.
Yes, yes, because I do notice I was a stay-at-home mom, believe it or not, and I do notice that a lot of them, yeah, their confidence level plummets. And some of them are career women. They used to be professionals, and even them, their confidence level just plummets because they agreed to stay at home, and it shouldn't be that way. And so, yeah, I've been on this mission for the last few months to empower them and to remind them, "Hey, you were a boss, B before, you can be one now. There's nothing stopping you."
Okay, so do they need to know a bunch of law to be able to do this? Because I think people are probably saying, like, what do I need to know to be able to go pro se?
You know what? It's not the law. Family court is 80% strategy, 20% law. So it's not really, you need to know the law, but you need to understand how to argue it. That's the key. You need to understand how to argue it, and present exactly what you have that's going to support your interpretation of it in a way that the judge is going to be convinced that what you say is verifiable and credible. That's the key. That's strategy.
And let's be clear, there are plenty of divorce attorneys out there who aren't good at arguing the things. I always say, when you are in front of a judge making an argument, you need to get to the point quickly, stick to the facts, and have your evidence ready to go. Judge, my husband spent $25,000 on his affair partner, and I have the account statements right here with all of the transactions highlighted, and I can tell you why I know those were for his affair partner. I find that not all attorneys know how to get to the point like that with the arguments. So, a pro se person who thinks, oh, I don't know how to argue it, nonsense. You can learn.
That's right. You can learn. I've taught people. I do mock trials. I do role playing with my clients. I teach them. Yeah, I teach them. And a lot of them are actually better than I was when I was in the courtroom. And I'll tell them that, yeah, you're gonna you kill this when you get in front of the judge. So yeah, you're absolutely 100% spot on.
Okay, you mentioned before having legal assistance in your case in a limited scope. So you're not having the attorney handle everything. And I talk sometimes about unbundled services, and I know you do as well. And I want to talk about that because I think a lot of people who are listening haven't heard the word unbundled when it comes to the legal services. And so I want them to understand how that works.
So unbundle is where you actually work with either a lawyer, a paralegal, or a legal document preparer on a per task basis. You don't have anybody going to court advocating for you or representing for you. They're just handling specific things like document preparation, document review, things like that, filing, service, things like that. So yeah, those are really viable options and they're becoming more and more prevalent now. Even some states are actually enacting legislation that makes it easier to work with those kind of professionals in unbundled services. So yeah.
Okay, so my ex has filed a motion in court to reduce my parenting time, and I don't know how to respond to it. Would that be a good situation where I could get some unbundled services like, hey, we have to file a response to it. Here are some of the things you want to have in it. Here's how we'll lay out a response.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly it. Absolutely. Yes.
Do you have some other situations where unbundled is a really good thing to be thinking about?
Yeah, legal research. A lot of people are intimidated by doing legal research. That's one of the unbundled services that I offer. Attorney search and vetting. I actually vet attorneys for people all over the country. That's an unbundled service that I offer. How about your judge? You want to know who your judge is. You want to know what their background is. You want to know how their background impacts the decisions they make in your courtroom, in their courtroom. I That's another service that those are unbundled services where you're not getting an attorney to handle those at $300 to $600 an hour. You're paying one flat fee, and I'm doing that for you. So those are typical unbundled services that I offer. I don't know anybody else who does those, but yeah, those are the things that I actually offer as well.
If someone has retained an attorney, would you be willing to sit in on meetings with their attorney, or is that going a little too far? Like, that attorney might feel like you're infringing on their area or something like that.
A lot of them do. I still have a lot of friends who are attorneys, and the first thing they'll say, yeah, they remind me, "Oh, make sure you're not giving legal advice. We don't need you around." And it's okay. It's okay. I have a lawyer who's a mentor. He's a retired attorney, and he's always reminding me. So I don't really work with attorneys like that. What I do is refer attorneys, and I make sure I have some sort of connection with my clients, with their attorney through my clients to ensure that I know what's going on so I can give them some strategic point of views. But I don't really go and sit in office with them because they always have this, hey, wait a minute. And I honestly think it's for other reasons. I don't necessarily think they're so concerned about the ethics. Some of them. Yeah.
I think that they are concerned about someone critiquing their work, about looking smarter than them, about offering alternatives, and I think that's where you can actually be so valuable is, I wonder if your attorney has thought about this angle. I wonder if your attorney has thought about approaching it that way. I think that can be so valuable, but I think that the attorney who's representing the client can feel very intimidated by that.
Absolutely. And I have to be careful because some of those things I can't really say, but there are ways that I actually circumvent them. I always check in with my mentor to make sure I'm doing it. But to be honest with you, Tracy, there are divorce coaches out there giving legal advice every single day. So, and nobody's gatekeeping them, nobody's watching them. They're doing. I've talked to divorce attorneys for the past month, and every single one of them, maybe except 10% of them, has said something to me that indicated that they're giving their clients legal advice, and I'm not. Who am I? But so yeah, it's a matter of, hey, I have to be mindful of what I say to them, and I have to be strategic about how I talk to them because a couple of them have said, "Hey, I need you to talk to my attorney," and I'm like, "Your attorney's not going to talk to me. Trust me, they're not going to want to."
What are some pitfalls that we need to be on the lookout for? So I'm getting divorced. I've listened to Tracey Bee. I am inspired. I really feel like I can handle my divorce myself. But what are some of the things that I should know as I'm going to this process to look out for, to be cautious of so that I don't mess something up?
One thing I always tell people is to watch the judge. And if the other party has an attorney, be mindful of the games and the tricks and the tactics they're going to play. Attorneys like to play games against pro se litigants. You have to watch those, especially if you're inundated with other things with life, or you have children to take care of and you're not really available to watch every little thing. You're going to have to figure out a way. I have resources for that as well, but you have to figure out a way to be 10 steps ahead of opposing counsel, and you absolutely have to know your judge. You need to know everything you can know about your judge because again, if you're in family court, the judge has the law, the judge has the court rules of procedure, but guess what? The judge can ignore those because family court happens to be the most unsupervised, unmonitored court in the industry. So,
I have been saying for decades that family court judges have a lot of latitude when they're making decisions. In other words, There are some laws there, but there are all sorts of issues where the judge can say, well, your issue doesn't quite follow along with the law. It's a little bit different. And therefore, I can make a different kind of ruling in it. And so you have to be careful.
Exactly. That's why I say it's 20% law. They get to decide how the law applies. They get to decide what other interceptors they can employ to avoid your version of how the law applies. So you have to be 10 steps ahead of them too. You have to know who they are, how they make those rulings, how they make those decisions, how they run their courtroom. That's where the key is. You have to absolutely know that.
Well, and you can't, as a pro se person, in my opinion, come into a courtroom and ask the judge, what am I supposed to file? What am I supposed to do? The
No.
judge is not there to provide information to you.
Absolutely. And please don't do that. One thing you should always do is research. Please research, not law. Research court rules of procedure, research your judge, research the opposing counsel. Period. Never mind the law. Get to know it, understand it, but spend most of your time on court rules of procedure because when the judge and the opposing counsel plays those games on you or do what they want to do, you know the court rules of procedure. Not necessarily the law. You'll know the court rules of procedure and you'll be able to say, well, judge, I don't know if you're able to do that because this rule says blah, blah, blah. And you do that on the record so that you're preserving your record. So,
And you
yes,
do it very respectfully. And that's one
of
of the
course.
reasons why we talk about practicing before you
Yes.
go in and things like that, of
That's
course.
important. That's very important. Always respectfully. The judge is the ego maniac in the courtroom. Feed his or her ego. Hey, you're only doing this for a few minutes. You can do it. It'll be okay. Yes, but yes, do that. Be respectful. Be mindful that it's his space. He gets to tell you when to be quiet. He gets to tell you where to stand. He gets to tell you to sit. He gets to do that, and you just do that respectfully.
Well, I know that you have a quiz and e-guide that you want to offer to our listeners. Tell me about that.
Yes, so I created a quiz and a guide to help people determine the level of conflict of their case and how much it's going to cost them, which I am always thinking, Tracy. I think about all these tools I can create to make things easier for my audience. And one of that's how I came up with that. Wait a minute. If a divorce is high conflict, it typically costs X amount of dollars based on where they are. Let me create something to help people sort of get an idea of what that cost looks like. And yeah, so it's really interesting. Of course, it's not scientific. It's based on my knowledge and a little bit of my research. The problem is there's not a lot of consistent research in family law or family court based on data. But based on having conversations and doing this for 5 years, I created something that I think will be really helpful for people who want to get an idea of, hey, how much will this cost me? Yeah. So, and especially if the recession is coming, the recession that's coming, we need to be mindful of every dollar we spend. So,
Well, I'm going to put a link to the Ultimate Conflict Predictor in the show notes, of course. I'm going to put a link to the Divorce Solutionist website so that everyone can find you. Tracey B, this has been so informative, so inspiring. Thank you so much for being here.
thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.